Packers at Bears, and this is an over and under special. Marco, let's talk about total factors in this game. One is the field. It seems to me that a lot of the experts are rightfully, in my opinion, talking about that this is a slow track, as they say, and that Green Bay is going to be hindered by that, not only because they're not as familiar with it, but because of the type of offense. Does that sound right to you?
Absolutely. You're going from a perfect climate, indoors, fast track, artificial surface, to play outdoors. Green Bay's not going to have that continuity that they had last week in Atlanta. And if you look at the scores from last week, both games, Chicago's game and Green Bay's game, were high-scoring games. So that would make the average Joe bettor want to look to the over. The problem is if you look at the two head-to-head meetings this year, they were both low-scoring games.
Okay, but that's the question, is if you try to get too inside the minds of bettors, you're going to say, well, wait a minute, they're going to see they were low scoring, and then they're going to overreact to that. But I'm not sure as you get to this round of the playoffs that a majority of the action isn't coming from guys who aren't even looking that deep. Because remember, the bigger the game is, the more the public makes up a higher percentage of the overall action.
Yeah, the phrase is there's more dead money out there at this time of the year.
So my point is there's going to be two conflicting handicapping angles. One is going to be, look how amazing Rodgers looked. He's the best performance I've ever seen. The other is going to be earlier in the year they played low-scoring games. Which ones are you going to think went out?
Well, yeah, they're going to. The people that are betting now are the people that just see what they're.
So what's the most recent total you're saying?
Most recent total on this game was, go back to the other page, 43.5.
Okay, so to me, 44 is one of the key number. 37, 44 are the two key numbers in totals. If you assume that you get the public action come game day, to me at 44.5, if you can actually get through that key number, you got some real value on the under here.
Absolutely, and I got I brought a couple stats along for you that support the under. Green Bay this year in their road games, they're 9-2 to the under this year. Chicago, the last two seasons when they've been made an underdog, which obviously we talked about that in the first video, they've gone under 14 of 18 games as an underdog.
Now let's talk about this last game, Week 17. As much as Chicago played fairly hard, even when there's a spectrum of effort. One is we don't care, to all the way up to Super Bowl level effort. It strikes me that even though the Bears tried more than some people might have thought, you would make the case the Packers had to have more intensity. It was a must-win for them. So even with the Bears, let's just say playing at 85%. Let's just throw that number out, which I think is fairly fair. Doesn't it surprise you how well on the road, and Lambeau is supposed to be a great home field, how well Chicago played, how close they kept that game, and the very fact that it was a low-scoring game? If you raise, Green Bay can't try any harder. Green Bay on the road is going to not be as effective on offense in theory. Chicago is going to try harder. Doesn't all those factors lead to say this Bears defense matches up well with Green Bay?
They do, RJ, but I'm going to say something. This is something I said not after the fact, before the fact. The last 2 weeks of the regular season, talked about this at length on both Gil's podcast and the Mega podcast with Mike and Dan on Fridays. Teams in that last week that control their own destiny and are a must-win, like Green Bay was, those are go against teams.
Yeah, go against because the number is inflated and people are overreacting to it. But just forget what the line was.
But there's a second reason to that. And the reason for that is teams in that position sometimes find themselves playing not to lose instead of playing to win. They're playing a little bit tighter.
But aren't they going to be tight in this game too?
Well, but now both teams have that same thing.
Which is going to make it more conservative.
Right. Bigger the game, generally, the more you'll see.
Which pushes to the under.
Exactly. I can't disagree.
So what I'm saying is you're saying that there are some factors in Week 17 that make it similar to this game and that Green Bay might have been a little tense. But you're saying now that both teams are going to be affected by that, and that's a factor that tends towards the under.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you right now, at 44.5, now you've got a team that plays each other. You know, usually interdivisional games are lower scoring because they know all the tricks.
See, I feel a little bit differently on that, and that's why I used the over in the Jets last week. Pittsburgh, not the Jets, I'm sorry, Baltimore and Pittsburgh. I had the over as my big play in the Pittsburgh game for just the opposite reason of that. When you know somebody so well, you know their strengths and you know their weaknesses, sometimes you got to change your game plan. And the game plan last week, as you saw, that both teams came out throwing the ball. They abandoned the run finally.
What game are we talking about?
Pittsburgh and Baltimore. And it was a situation, the first two games were low-scoring games, as low-scoring as you could have.
I mean, do you really, we'll talk about this in the Steelers if we need to, but do you think Baltimore came out throwing? I certainly didn't see that. I saw Baltimore doing nothing on offense, just like I predicted, and there was 2 turnovers, and they were able to score because of that. But that's a different conversation. I heard experts talking about the fact that because it was a must-win in Week 17, that though the Bears might have played hard, they were playing vanilla. That there certainly was no tricks they were going to spring in that game, you know, special gadget-type plays, or gadgets aren't always flea flickers or whatever, but a tight end throwback or whatever. Do you value that to say if Chicago was able to play vanilla and Green Bay wasn't, that's an advantage for Chicago here?
If they were, I agree with that. But I can tell you, listening to, you know, Lovie Smith and everything, they wanted to knock Green Bay out of the playoffs. This is a team that they didn't want to have to face again. And look at it. I mean, this team is the hottest team in everybody's eyes. This is the team that is the favorite to win the Super Bowl right now of the 4 teams that are left. And they're on the road. That doesn't make sense.
All right, my official projection in this game is towards the under. I personally think that what we're going to likely see is a betting up come game day at 44.5. Remember, 44 is the key number. I think there's real value on the under. Any closing thoughts?
No, I can't disagree with anything you're saying, sir.
Perfect. Now it's your turn to continue the conversation in the comments section with Marco and me. And next up, we're going to be talking my best bet. And again, Marco's Mr. Pittsburgh, but I got to tell you, it's almost like I got a crystal ball when it comes to the Steelers. We'll be talking Pittsburgh and the Jets.